My name is John Eberhardt, and you're with me today at the Woodbridge Veterans Project. And with me today is Captain Arlene Green-Zerpola. Welcome.
Thank you very much, John.
It's nice to have you here, and we're going to start it where all stories start, and that's where you were born.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
The great town of brotherly love.
City of brotherly love, that's correct.
Now, a little bit of story before you went into the Air Force and then National Guard. Your education?
Okay, I'm a part of the public school system of Philadelphia. My parents moved out to Marple Township for my last 2 years of high school. Then I came back in the city and I went to Einstein Medical Center School of Nursing, 3-year diploma school, Broad, York in North Philadelphia.
Okay, so you became a nurse.
Became a nurse.
And now we're going to transition you from civilian life into the military life. And you have an interesting story about how that happened. Something
Yes.
occurred in an elevator, or?
Yes, quite by chance. I really had never heard of the Air National Guard or anything about it. And I was working at the Eastern Pennsylvania Psychiatric Institute, which was a psychiatric institute mainly for research and training of doctors. So it was a 100-bed hospital, but it had like 3 members of staff for every patient, which is unheard of, wow, especially in a state-sponsored hospital. So I was there a few weeks, and I got into the elevator, and when I got in the elevator, there was a young woman there, about the same age as me, obviously a new nurse, and she said to me, "You're Arlene Green, aren't you?" And I thought, uh-oh, and I said, "Yes, I am, but do I know you?" And she said, "Well, no," but she said, "I was the editor of our nursing school yearbook, and we used the same photographer Einstein used, and your picture came to our school. So I saw your picture and I saw who you were, and then I sent it back to him, and he obviously sent it back to Einstein." So we struck up a friendship, and we would sit together in the cafeteria. And one day she said to me, "I got something in the mail from an outfit called Pennsylvania Air Guard." She said, "And they're having a recruitment, and it's at the Philadelphia airport." She said, "I know you live out that way." And I had lived there. That's where my parents had moved to when I was in the last 2 years of high school. She said, "I don't know how to get there." She said, "Would you go with me?" And it was on a Saturday morning, and it was very early, and I was not sure. But I said to her, "Look, I'll ask my roommate. If she wants to go, we'll come, we'll pick you up, we'll take you." So I asked my roommate, excuse me, and she said, "Sure, I'll go with you." So we picked her up, and we went out to the Philadelphia airport, and we met this sergeant. As I look back on it, almost everybody I knew in the Air Guard was a sergeant. I don't think we saw many people higher than that. And he gave us this introductory speech, and he told us that they were starting this new unit, air evacuation, medical evacuation, and they needed nurses. And he had been given this opportunity to go out and recruit. They were looking for, I believe, at least a dozen girls. So he gave us this whole thing, and he told us how our training missions would be to Puerto Rico, and we would have to give them, like maybe once every 4 weeks, we have to get on the plane and go to Puerto Rico and spend the weekend, tough duty,
yeah, tough
and
duty.
Come back. And he also explained to us that for every 4 hours that you put in on a weekend, you got 8 hours pay. And the 8 hours pay was at the rate of a second lieutenant, not a female second lieutenant, but a second lieutenant in the service.
There was a difference between the two.
There was a difference. In those days, women really did not make anything near what men made, and nurses didn't make very much. I hate to tell you this, I'm really dating myself, but when I got out of nursing school, as a registered nurse with my certification, I was making $310 a month, okay? So, and I was making more than my roommate, who was only making $300. But at any rate, that sounded really good to me, that every 4 hours we were going to make 8 hours of pay, and we were going to get to fly to Puerto Rico. So when he was all done giving us this little speech, I said to him, "Okay, what are we obligated for?" And he said, "Well, you're not obligated for anything." I said, "What do you think, I was born yesterday? You're going to take me to Puerto Rico? You're going to give me 8 hours pay for every 4 hours I give you? I must be obligated for something." He said, "Well, suppose you come in and you go to flight school and you don't like flying. It scares you, or you can't do it. Or suppose you get married and leave the state. He said, what am I going to do? He said, am I going to draft you? He said, you're a woman. We don't draft women. So there's nothing I can do to you if you tell me that you no longer want to continue.
You can quit.
In the Air Guard, you can quit. I said, where do I sign? I was the first person in the room who signed up. And that was, I believe that must have been in January. And I think we started, actually, I was officially made a part of the Guard unit in February or March of '63. And it was such a new unit. And we were assigned to the Philadelphia Naval Air Station. We didn't even have our own air station. So we were Air National Guard, which is like the illegitimate child of the Air Force. But at the same time, we were flying out of a naval air station. So there was no place to get a uniform. So we were, from February or March till we went to officers training school in October of that year, we didn't even have uniforms.
We're in civvies the whole time.
We were in civvies. We used to come after our 1 weekend a month, and basically what we were doing was we were training corpsmen. The nurses were training corpsmen, so we would run through our little thing for the day, whatever it was we were trying to teach them, and then have a long lunch at the Naval Officers Club, you know, and finish up, and then we would go home, and that was, and we would drive there and drive back. So the 2 days we didn't stay there. We drove and we drove back. But it wasn't until October that we went to officers training, the officers training course in Alabama, and learned how to wear a uniform. So we were so unmilitary.
Where the emblems go and the...
Everything, where everything went and where it didn't go.
Right.
You know, I always tell the story. I was so naive about the ways of the service, and we were used to people putting their insignia on in the wrong place because we were all new. And we had this dinner, and we had all of these big shots that came in to speak to us. And this one guy came across the room, and he had what looked to me to be flight wings, which we were issued, and he had them on his shoulders like this.
I know
And
where you're going.
And I burst out laughing, and my friend said to me, why are you laughing? I said, look at that guy over there. He has his flight wings on in the wrong place. And he was, in fact, a full bird colonel. Yes. And those were his insignias. So anyway, we learned. And the sergeants that we dealt with when we were there, their biggest pleasure in life was to see us coming across the campus with our arms full of books and to get right up to us and throw us a salute just to see what we would
See
do.
your response.
Well, the books went down on the floor and the hands went up and nobody knew what hand you were supposed to salute with, and they just thought it was great sport.
Oh, just for our audience, over the lower rank person salutes and has to hold the salute until the superior returns it.
Right,
So,
exactly.
so they were testing you.
They were testing us, and they just loved to do that. We were there 3 weeks. We learned to march. We learned how to wear a uniform, and basically, we had a good time. But
So you, from this chance meeting on an elevator
exactly.
to taking someone for a ride to the airport,
Yeah.
you're suddenly thrown in the middle of this the
Exactly.
military. Now, you also had a problem there with the masks for altitude, or
That was when we went, after the 3 weeks at basic orientation, we went to Texas, to the School of Aerospace Medicine, which is in San Antonio. And there, we learned how to correlate everything we had learned in nursing school to altitude, how the different disease entities reacted at altitude and what happens if you lose the air pressure. So they actually were teaching you, giving you a refresher course of your 3 years, but at altitude. Then at the same time, because we were on, it was the School of Aerospace Medicine, and we were going to be on flying status, we had to go to take different kinds of survival training. We did water survival in the pool. They gave us other survival movies and whatnot, but we also had to go up in the chamber, and they take you up in the chamber, you'd wear the mask, then they tell you to take your mask off, and then you were supposed to write so that you could see what happens if you're in an atmosphere where you don't have oxygen, how long it would take for you to stop being coherent in what you were writing. But the problem became, I put that mask on, and I suffered a claustrophobic reaction. And I thought, well, my career is over. I am not going to be able to do this. But the sergeant, again, who ran the unit there that was taking us up, he gave me a mask, and he told me, take it home with you, take it to the nurse's residence, put it on every night while you're studying, and you'll get used to it. And basically that's what I did. I took it home, and
Wow.
as I was studying my unit for the night, I would wear it, and of course everybody would come in and laugh at me. But by the time I went back in the chamber, I was used to it.
But that takes courage to do something that you knew that you were going to have a reaction to.
Well, it was, I never thought I would be claustrophobic about anything, but I really was. I put that thing on and I said, oh my God.
So now you did several years in the Guard.
Well, what happened was, after that, the 6 weeks, which, by the way, while I was down there, John F. Kennedy came to dedicate the school buildings.
Mm.
And he came to us the day before he was assassinated.
Wow.
So we were right there, and we saw him. And he was traveling totally unprotected in a car with school buses and public buses on the sides of the road where people were staring down into the car as he was passing.
President of the United States.
President of the United States. And I said to this friend I was with, he'd be the easiest person in the world to assassinate. And this friend said, but you would never get away with it. And the person who would kill him wouldn't want to get away with it. They would just want to kill him.
Just accomplished.
And the next day, he was
Wow.
assassinated in Dallas. Anyway, so I went home and became a member of the regular Guard. And I was not in it that long because I had met a young man while I was on active duty with the Guard, and we had struck up a friendship, and we wrote to each other and we called each other. And then I married him, and he was in the service, and he was stationed in Texas. So I had to leave Pennsylvania. So just like the sergeant had said, I wrote a letter and I said, I'm not going to be in Pennsylvania anymore. And they said, fine. So that was the end of that. But
that's not the end of your career.
that was not the end of my career. But the one funny story I'll tell you about that. After we came back from active duty, my cousin, who was in the Navy, was getting married, and he was in Jacksonville. And we're a very close family. All the cousins were very close. And everybody was upset because he was getting married in Jacksonville and nobody could go. Nobody had any money. So one weekend when I was at the base, I went in to the sergeant who was running everything. And he was sitting at a typewriter and he was typing various things. And I said to him, you know, can I fly military standby to go down and see my cousin get married in Jacksonville? And he said, well, you really can't fly military standby unless you're going someplace on business and you got to have orders and, you know. And I said, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then as I finished my sentence, he ripped this paper out of the typewriter and he said to me, here are your orders, go to Jacksonville.
So the whole time you thought he was ignoring you,
yes, the whole time I thought he was just, you know, giving me a hard time. And there he was typing my orders. And I never was found out about that. So I went to Jacksonville, saw my cousin get married.
Nice.
Very nice, yeah.
Very nice. Okay, so now.
So I was in Texas with my husband, and then we moved to Virginia, and we were married a couple of years, and things were not working out so well. So we separated. And when I went home, I went to my parents' house, which I had not lived in my parents' house since I was 17. And that was not going to last very long. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Because in those days, women of my age, they were all married and had children. All my friends were married and had children. So I said, oh, I don't have anybody to be friends with. I don't know where I'm going to live because I can't live with my parents, though I knew I could get a job anywhere as a nurse. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go in the Air Force. They're going to supply me with a place to live, a job, a ready-made social life, friends, everything. And that was really one of the best decisions I ever made in my life.
It was also during
conflict. Yes, it was during the Vietnam era. It was in '67. They were, you know, but the Air Force, it wasn't like the Army. The Army, you were a nurse, you went into the Army, you almost always went right to Vietnam, okay, because they had all the bases and they needed all the nurses. The Air Force had one or two places that they were using nurses. Cam Bay was one, and then I think there were some medevac units. But they didn't give that to you as a first. They brought you in and they put you on a regular base. And then you could say if you wanted to go, or if they needed you, they would send you. The base I was at, I went to North Carolina. I was at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, which was a fighter base. And during the time you were there, you filled out what you used to call your dream sheet, where you wanted to go. But almost all the girls in that unit had volunteered for Vietnam. Because if you really wanted to know what you were worth as a nurse, that was where to go. That was where you really saw if you could, you know, be something and do something in the medical field. But there were so many volunteers, and some girls volunteered because they had brothers who had been drafted or who were in the Air Force and they didn't want their brothers to go to Vietnam. But whatever their reasons were, the Air Force had too many volunteers. So instead, the Air Force, in its infinite wisdom, sent me to Germany. Oh, I couldn't complain about that,
No.
could I? No. But the base in North Carolina was great. I was a regular hospital nurse there. We took care of mostly young men who were in the service who needed care. But there were other units. I didn't work on them. We had a labor and delivery for the dependents, and we had some other units for children. But I worked on the unit that had the young men, mostly young men, some older veterans who were coming in for treatment. But it was a small hospital, and it was...
It's not to say you didn't spend some flight time, which is mind-boggling to me, to try to be a caretaker at 30,000 feet.
Well, that was when we got to Europe. But you did have to do, when you were on flying status, even if you were not doing a flying job, you had to maintain a certain standard for mobility. Okay, you were considered on a mobility roster. Mm-hmm. And so there were things you had to do. For instance, I had to qualify with the M16 rifle. That was when I was in North Carolina. So they sent us over to this shooting range. And here we were, these nurses with these M16s, which was amazing. I had never shot a gun before or anything. But I was so short. You had to shoot this thing from 3 different positions. Standing, kneeling, and then one where your legs are crossed and you're... Well, every time I tried to get down into the cross-legged position, the gun was so big and my legs were so short that the gun would be pointed at the ground and I could never get it up. So they let me do it from a prone position, and I qualified with the M16.
So you qualified with the M16?
I qualified with the M16. And we also had other things that we had to do to keep mobility. And if we had, for instance, one time, I think they were Green Berets, or somebody came to the base and they had their helicopters. And they asked if anybody on mobility roster wanted to go up and get a few hours in a helicopter. So I did that, you know, whatever I could to, but the joke of this, if you want to call it that, the irony of this situation was, you know, women still didn't have the same kind of position that men did, all right? So most of the nurses who were on mobility were women. We had like 2 male nurses, and the rest were female. One weekend I was home, and the Pueblo, I don't know if you remember that incident, but the Pueblo was boarded by the Koreans and carted away to North Korea, all right? They mobilized our base, the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and in the course of a weekend, packed up practically the entire base, put it on the back of C-5s and whatever they had, and moved it out. And of course, the young men who were all fighter pilots, they flew their planes, and they went to Korea. The only nurses on flying status who went were the 2 male nurses. They wouldn't send any women who were on flying status.
That was the sign of the times.
Yeah,
yes.
And it's so different today, where young women in the field are under fire, even if they're not supposed to be, but they are. But in those days, they wouldn't let us go.
Yeah, on warships now, yeah.
Nor would they let the chaplain go. He tried to get on the plane, and they escorted him on.
They wouldn't let the chaplain
No,
go.
they wouldn't let the chaplain go. So we were basically on this base with just administrative skeleton crew and female nurses for the better part of 5 months, till they sent them home from Korea.
But that's not to say, that you didn't spend some time. You were on several aircraft.
Yeah, there were different aircraft that we flew on. When I was in the Guard, I flew on, remember the flying boxcar?
Yes.
Yes, that was what I went up on my training missions. I never got to Puerto Rico, Must have been something
Oh,
wrong
really?
there. But I did get up on the flying boxcar. My first trip up, the pilots, they said to me, where do your parents live? And I told them they live in Marple Township. And they buzzed my parents' house for me. But most of the time in North Carolina, we just did helicopters that came in, or maybe some other kind of a guy that came in that had some seats available. They took us up, but we really didn't do any training. It was a fighter base, and one of the big controversies was because they had two F-4Cs. I don't know if you remember the Phantom.
Yep.
They had a pilot in the front and a pilot in the back, and the guy in the back was called that, the Gib, the guy in the back. And the pilots who flew in the back, they always felt like a monkey could do their job. They felt very put upon.
The guy up front is
the guy in the front was driving the plane.
He's the guy.
And they're in the back. So kind of to prove their point, and also kind of because I was like a mascot to a lot of those units out there, they decided that they were going to take me up in a plane. And I have a picture of me in the F-4C.
In a fighter, not a plane.
In the fighter.
It's a fighter, two-seat fighter.
Right. They hung me from the ceiling and put all the stuff on me and in case you had to punch out or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But I never did actually go up in the plane, but got up to the point where they were going to take me. But then we had a very bad accident on the base, and it just changed things. So.
Yeah. That's pretty exciting though, to
Yeah,
sit in
it
a
was.
fighter.
It was. And then, as I said, I was transferred to Europe, to Rhein-Main Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. And that was where I was on air vac status. I was flying. I had my wings. I was I made promotion. I was by that time a captain. When I was in the Guard, I was a second lieutenant. When I came in to the reserves full time, I was a first lieutenant. And then when I got to Germany, I became a captain.
Full captain. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, and there, basically, that was what we did. We just flew. So in those days, it was really great because there was almost no place you could go and come back in a crew day. Crew day is 16 hours. But because we had prop jets, and because we were doing all of these, making stops and going
Now, which
around,
planes were you on at this point?
131 Samaritan, which was a two-prop.
Samaritan, right?
And then the 118s.
The Liftmaster.
The Liftmaster, which had 4 props,
Right.
2 on each side. And we had to be proficient in both. So when you first went over, you had to study to take your test, to be able to identify different things on the plane and to know all the emergency procedures. And after you took your test and after you passed that, then you could go out on your own missions. And the nurses were the senior medical officer on board planes. We did not carry doctors as a rule. We were told that if somebody got sick, a passenger, because we did carry some dependents as passengers, or sometimes people would wait in the waiting area, and if we had a couple seats left over on our planes,
Right.
and we would open them up to other military personnel. But we were told if somebody got sick or took a turn for the worse, one of our patients, that we should always ask if there was a doctor on board before we went ahead and did what we were supposed to do. But most of the time we did not have doctors. And a very odd thing, by the time I was done my 3 years practically in Germany, I felt very offended that I would have to ask a doctor what to do if he was on board, because I was used to doing it by myself. And one half of me would say,
go ahead and do it.
One half of me would say, he's only doing what any good doctor would do. And the other half of me would say, no, I can do this, But we were the chief medical officer.
Now, one of the planes, something happened with one of the engines?
On the 118, after I had passed my my training missions, I was up on a 118, and we had what was called a nurse's station. And on the Air Force planes, you fly backwards to the right way with your back to the cockpit. All right. So on the right-hand side of the plane, there was a nurse's station. It was a big desk, and I could put all my equipment. And in front of me were stanchions in case we carried litter patients. And the other half of the plane would be seats primarily. We could also put up stanchions for litter patients. And stuff to make meals with, because you had to feed the people you were with. So we did a little bit of everything. But I was sitting at the nurse's station. We hadn't been up in the air too long. And I looked out the window, and one of our engines was on fire. Now, that was unusual. So I didn't want to alarm anybody. So I got up very nicely and went to the front and knocked on the cockpit door. And the pilot said, "What do you want? What do you want?" And I said, "We have an engine on fire." And he said, "We know. We're trying to feather the engine. Don't worry about it. Go back and keep everybody calm." So I said, "Oh, okay." But I was not yet used to handling military people on
Right.
planes. I mean, he said, "Keep everybody calm." I open the door and go back in the cabin, and in my nurse's station, there's at least a half a dozen Air Force guys
Looking out the
taking
window.
pictures of the engine on fire, right? I didn't have to keep them calm at all. They were totally calm. And that was the way service people were anyway. I remember one time I was taking a plane down. We were supposed to go, this was before Gaddafi threw us out of Libya. And I was taking these dependents mostly back to Libya. They had been in the German hospitals and they had all been taken care of. And my Air Force pilot, he called me up and he said to me, "You know, there's a big sandstorm in Libya and we can't land. So you're going to have to tell everybody that we're going to have to stop in Malta." And most of these
nice
people,
island.
yeah, most of these people had been in Germany for quite a while. So I thought, gee, they're going to be disappointed, you know. So I went back and I made an announcement. I said, "I'm sorry to tell you, this big sandstorm in Libya. We're going to have to spend the night in Malta." This great cheer came up from among
Malta,
the people.
Libya, Malta.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everybody was very happy to go to Malta, and I had never been there before.
Beautiful
and that was a
island.
British base when
Yes.
we landed at. And they didn't have the kind of stairs that we did, but they rolled this thing up to the plane when we opened the door, and here were all these, you know, they salute different than
With their
we
palms
do.
out,
Yeah,
yes.
right. And here were all these little British guys, and they were calling me Sister Green because they call their nurses sister. You know,
Okay.
"Sister Green, is there anything we can get for you, Sister Green?" And we spent a lovely night in Malta. It was
It's
very,
a
very
beautiful
nice.
island.
Yeah, beautiful.
The NATO base is there, I think.
Yeah. So you really there was not too much that would upset a plane load of military people and their dependents. I learned that very quickly. They were all very calm about almost anything you told them.
Now, we're going to drag the Navy in here a little bit. You tell a story about
Okay.
the Navy aircraft and what happens
All right.
sometimes when they're damaged.
All right. Well, lots of places that we landed were naval air stations because we were an equal opportunity picker-upper. We picked up people in the Navy, in the Army, and in the Air Force. But the planes that we had were very old and often broke, as we said, break. We knew if the plane broke at any naval air station that we were good for at least one night on the ground, because the Navy's idea of maintenance was to wrap that broken fuel line in duct tape. And the Air Force would not fly with a plane that was duct taped. So we used to
Good
call
old
back
duct
up to
tape.
Germany, and they would send the parts down and we would fix it. And that's how we got to spend quite a few nights in Naples. Every time we broke down in Naples, that was where the Navy was. So we got to see a lot of Naples and other stations too. But primarily, we had like 4 different kinds of missions a week. We covered everything as far north as Norway, as far south as North Africa,
Wow.
and as far east as Turkey. So it was a big
Huge.
area, right. So the little planes that we had, we took them, we would go up to England, and we would go up on a Monday morning, and we would spend 4 days in England. And we were basically a bus service. We would go out in the morning, and we would go to all these bases in England, pick up people, and take them to the big hospital, I think it was at Lakenheath. And that's what we did for 4 days. So we basically ran a bus service in England. We did the same thing in Spain. But there we went to, I think we went to Morocco. Yeah, Morocco, because every place you went, you either bought something or you know, so you knew what was.
Yeah.
In fact, I always tell the story of the first year I was in Europe. Every time we went out someplace, I would say, "Oh, where am I going now? Oh, what am I going to see? Oh, we're going to Athens. I'm going to see the Parthenon." Or, "Oh, we're going to England. We're going to spend the night in London," or whatever. The second year, it was, "What am I going to buy? Oh, we're going to England. I'm going to buy China. Oh, we're going to go to Italy. I'm going to buy a Globe bar." Oh,
Somebody's enjoying touring.
Exactly. And when we would fly into Morocco, they would buy these big ships that would come crated. That, I don't know if you've ever seen people would take them home. They put them in their dining room or whatever.
Oh,
They
yes,
were
yes.
Huge ships.
Yep.
And the other thing we used to pick up all the time in Morocco was not oranges, tangerines. One time, I had this vision in my mind that if the plane went down, all they would find would be these ships floating in a lake of tangerine juice because we had so many tangerines and so many ships. But anyway, the third year, everything came down to, what am I going to eat? And that was it.
What type of food
Going
am I
to
getting?
Italy, I'm going to have pasta. I'm going to Greece, I'm going to have lamb chops. And that, in the end, that all came down to food. So I guess that tells you something.
Well, you
about
covered a lot of territory.
a lot of territory.
A lot of
And
territory.
when we were in Spain, we flew into Turkey. And we also did the little Turkey flight and picked people up. And some people went to Torrejon, to the hospital there, but a lot of people went back to Germany. So we had the Spain mission, we had the England mission, we had the Athens mission. All right, and the Athens mission, we went to Turkey. We did, because we had the bigger plane. We did the full Turkey run. We went to Adana, Ankara, Incirlik, Chile, all these places in Turkey, and we had 3 missions a week to Greece.
Wow.
So we had 2 4-day missions and 1 5-day mission. So we had a lot of time in Greece and Turkey, and my daughters always like for me to tell the story about Turkey. When you used to have a problem in Turkey, if you were temporarily, because everything was timed, when you set down your wheels on that tarmac, you had a certain amount of time to get those patients on board and to get those wheels up again.
Wow,
and
okay.
if you didn't do it in the time you were supposed to, you went back for retraining. It was really, had to be fast, okay? Everybody was on the flight line waiting for us, all little cracker boxes with the patients, everything, and just loaded these patients up and off you went.
Just for our audience, cracker box is an ambulance.
An ambulance,
Okay.
yes, one of those like you used to see in, if you watched MASH on TV, those are the kind of ambulances we're talking about. They called them cracker boxes. So we were in Turkey, and we had a problem when we were on the flight line. Well, when you had a problem on the flight line, the first thing that would happen would be the Turkish vendors would drive out to the plane and try to sell you
sell,
things.
yeah.
Yes. And most of the time they were selling you either pistachio nuts, or they were selling you, they called them camel saddles, the little hassocks that you put your feet on that had the camel head and the camel tail.
Okay.
Yeah, so camel saddles, they called them. And that was primarily what they were selling. But this one day, the plane was in such bad condition that we all had to go into the base ops. So we went into the base ops, and this enterprising gentleman who had tried to sell us pistachios came running into base ops, and he had on his shoulder this big rug, and he unfurled this rug in the middle of the floor of base ops. It was beautiful Turkish rug. And he went to my flight crew, and he was trying to sell it.
Sell his wares, sure.
And nobody was too interested. And then I saw some furtive, talking and gesturing in my direction, which my flight crew later told me was this gentleman trying to sell them the rug for me. It was an even exchange. Me for the rug.
You were on the chopping block.
Right. But I didn't know that at the time, and they were all, laughing and having a good time. So they told him that they couldn't sell me. So he came over to me, and he said, Captain Lady, he said, you like the rug? I said, it's a beautiful rug. I said, but I can't afford it. He said to me, you come with me. I'll give you the rug. At this point, my crew starts screaming, we think she's a 2-rug girl ourselves. Offer her 2, So it was fun. We always had a good time, no matter what. We were broken
it sounds
down.
like you really enjoyed it.
We really did. We had a good time. So that was the third, and then the 4th mission was the Germany mission. And when you're on the Germany mission, you might go down to Italy, or you might
Not a bad place.
Right, or you might just go around Germany, or if you had a reason to, they would send you into Berlin. Now, at the time, Berlin was still a divided city,
Right.
with the Russians
wall
on
was
one
up.
side and the Americans on the other. And the Berlin corridor, which is supposed to be some of the roughest air in the world, which I don't know if you remember the Berlin airlift.
Oh, sure.
And all those planes going in, delivering food. That corridor is the same corridor we used to go to Tempelhof, which is the airport that was just closed down. big historical value to Temple Hop. And many times when you would be flying this corridor, I know I personally had it myself once, you look out the windows and there are the MiGs, the Russian MiGs following you.
Watching where you're going.
Watching where you're going into escorting us.
You had the U.S. Star on there, so there were...
Exactly, and the little, the red cross in the back. So we never had a problem with them, but they would watch us because, they were...
They'd tag along.
Cold War, at that point. And let's see, what else about that? But we didn't go in there that often. But when you did, you had to watch it. But in preparation for the fact that you might be shot down behind enemy lines, we had to take these courses given usually by an intelligence officer. I won't say anything about that.
No, we won't go into
that
at all.
No, we won't go there. But these intelligence officers would give you training on how to survive if you went down behind enemy lines. And they used to put little kits on the plane. And the kits would have like gold. So that was what you were supposed to use instead of paper money.
It's your exchange,
and I used to think to myself, some poor farmer living out in, Yenomsville somewhere, he goes into town with this gold thing, like they're not going to know that he has some
Guess who's at my
Air Force
farm?
pilot
That's
hiding
right.
in my farm, in my barn there. So at any rate, but the best part of this was that they taught you that once you were captured, that it was your duty to break out of wherever you were being held.
Primary mission.
Exactly. And
Name, rank, serial number. That's
exactly. And they would teach you different techniques for breaking out of an enemy POW camp. The best was when they showed us this movie, and they showed you how you go to the perimeter, and if you are approached by the guard with his German Shepherd, all right, that the way you were supposed to handle that was you were supposed to take your hand, your fist, stick it down the dog's throat so he couldn't bite you, pick the dog up, wrap the dog around your head, and toss him at his handler, and then get away.
Sounds like... has this ever been done?
I don't know, but I always said I would be sure to get away because the guard would be laying on the ground laughing so hard as I tried to pick this dog up and swing him over my head that he would be incapable of stopping me from doing anything.
That's funny.
So that was the big thing on the how you maintain your ability to break out of POW camp.
By picking a dog up by his throat.
But yeah,
literally.
put your hand down his throat, pick the dog up, swing him over your head, toss him at the handler. I thought, you're right.
You also tell a story about a pipe explosion or some sort of explosion, or
That was probably the biggest medical mission that we had when I was in there. Now, you had to understand what happened was Gaddafi decided he didn't want us in Libya anymore. So he threw us all out. And we, the airvac people, we went down to get the dependents out, to load them on the planes and take them out. And in fact, I was one of the last American planes to leave the tarmac in Libya with dependents on it. So that happened during the time I was in Europe. But what happened was, after we were gone and we had no communication with them, British workers who were working on a pipeline, and this is a natural gas pipeline, in Libya, the pipeline exploded, and these guys were severely burned. I think there were 9 of them, something like that. They immediately called the Air Force, who called us, because we were the closest unit, and they put together a medevac unit with Libya's consent to go down to Libya and pick up these burn patients and take them to England. That mission, we had a doctor. Of course, that was a big mission. So there were 2 nurses, bunch of corpsmen, and doctor, and we went down and we picked these guys up and we took them to England for treatment.
We'll just clarify that also, because I don't know what people think corpsmen, they think Navy corpsmen, but the Air Force also
Air
had
Force
corpsmen.
has corpsmen, yeah. We had great corpsmen.
Now you've, medals, did you receive medals for your service?
Well, everybody receives the usual and customary. You receive one for the unit that you're in. If your unit ever was decorated, you get to wear that.
Right.
As a Vietnam-era veteran, you got to wear a certain kind
The
of
National Defense.
Right, National Defense ribbon.
Nicknamed the Gee Dunk Medal.
Whatever.
Because you could buy it in the Gee Dunk, yes.
Okay. So, and you would, put these on your uniform. But I was fortunate enough and very proud to say that when I left Europe, I was awarded an Air Force Commendation Medal. This is what happened during the time I was there. After I became fully qualified to fly on both planes, I was elevated to a flight instructor, and I taught other nurses and corpsmen what they needed to know about each individual aircraft and the patients that they were taking care of. And after I became an instructor, I was elevated to flight examiner, which meant that I examined the instructors to make sure they were doing what they should do. And after I was an examiner for a while, the young woman who was our standardization and evaluation officer was leaving the base, and she recommended me for her position. And that really was something that a lot of women didn't get to do.
Meritorious service,
That's
which is,
right.
that's an honor.
Right.
That's
So
an
I
honor.
was the chief standardization evaluation officer for my unit in Germany for the last, I guess, year or so that I was over there. It was really
That is a big deal.
it was good. It was
Yeah.
and I always liked, I'd go to these meetings with all these other standing eval officers, and I'd be the only woman in the room, all these guys.
How great was that?
Well, I quickly learned that you catch a lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yes.
And when I wanted things done, instead of making a big stink about it, I would present it in a different kind of way.
Politely with a smile.
Exactly. And usually people listen to me. For a while there, they had us using C-130s to transport our patients, totally ill-suited for medevac
Is that the
missions.
Hercules?
That's the Hercules.
Yeah.
And it's cold inside. The seats just run along the side,
It's
or
a
the
transport.
canvas seats, exactly. The bathroom was a bucket with a, curtain around
yeah.
it. And we were carrying women and children and babies, and I made my displeasure known in a nice way. And they told me they would try not to use them unless everything else was broken down or gone. And it worked for us, but it was really
Yeah, that's not a good aircraft.
no, not for
It's good for a Jeep.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
Now, you left the service willingly, or kind of with a little sadness?
Yes, I met in Germany a young man from New Jersey. And my mother used to say to me, you had to go all the way to Germany to meet a guy from New Jersey?
Just the next state
The
over.
next state over. And I married him, and shortly after we got married, he told me he had to come back to Woodbridge and assist his dad in the family business, which I don't think I ever thought of that. I thought he was going to stay in, and
Right.
I was going to stay in. And
'Cause you wanted this to be your career.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And in fact, the Air Force had already selected me to go to school to get my BS in nursing. And I had broached the possibility that I could go to Seton Hall, stay in the Air Force, go to Seton Hall, and still be close enough to Woodbridge.
Yeah.
But my husband and his fathers felt that it was
No.
not worth the chance. So I did get out. And I have two beautiful daughters and great in-laws.
And you can mention them, both of them.
Walter and Eleanor Zerpolo, two of the greatest people.
And your daughters.
And my daughters are Erin and Brianna Zerpolo. Well, my youngest daughter just got married. Brianna Zerpolo Starkey.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we were part of the community. So I don't have any complaints about that. But everything, hindsight 2020, probably I missed staying in the service.
That didn't stop your education.
No, it did
didn't
not.
stop you and say,
No. What happened when I got out, I got a job. They had just opened an extended care facility, which I believe now is part of Perth Amboy's hospital complex. It's not even Perth Amboy anymore.
It's Raritan
They call it
Bay.
Raritan Bay.
Right.
So this was a brand new place. It was just opened. I was hired as the assistant director of nursing. And we were brand new staffing. We were hiring everybody, and the patients hadn't started coming, and then they started coming. And all of a sudden, I couldn't deal with it. Everything was about money. How much each pill cost. What kind of meals these patients were going to get. Everybody in the cafeteria had to go home at 5 o'clock so they wouldn't have to pay them overtime. So that meant the patients had their big meal at 4:30 in the afternoon. They were supposed to have a reasonable snack in the evening. We were giving them crackers and juice. I kept saying this is not a reasonable snack for people who haven't eaten since 4:30. But everything was about money. It costs money, it costs money. So I went home and I said to my husband, I am not going to do this. I cannot do this. I've just come from an environment where money was never mentioned.
Oh, yeah, the military.
There's no object. If you had to fly somebody from Adana, Turkey to, Rhine Mine, you did it. Nobody ever asked a question.
And here they're giving crackers.
Exactly. And I couldn't do it. But I said to him, you know what I'm going to do? I said, I have the GI Bill. And
Yes.
I'm going to go to school. And I'm just going to take what I want to take. I'm not going to take anything that's going to get me a better job or that has a goal at the end.
Something of interest.
Right. And that's what I did. I went, I took one semester at Middlesex County just to make sure that I wasn't too rusty. And then I went to Seton Hall. And I did basically a double major.
So you did get to Seton Hall.
Yeah, I went to Seton Hall. I took history and anthropology. And then after that, I took...
That's there, from nursing to history and anthropology. Okay,
right.
it was of interest.
Right.
Okay.
And then a master's from Seton Hall, finished my GI Bill. I have a master's in education with a concentration in student personnel services, higher education.
Wow.
But then
Rutgers somehow got in there, didn't there?
well, Rutgers I went to later.
Okay.
Rutgers I went to, and I got a master's of science in industrial relations, human resources. And I had a great job working for the state of New Jersey under Governor Kane. It was a brand new program
Yes, Governor.
he was instituting. And my boss and myself, we designed, set up the program. But when Governor Florio was elected, though he gave lip service to our program, he didn't fund us. So I knew at that point that it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
So I went to law school, and now I'm a lawyer.
Unbelievable.
So whatever, but
A nursing lawyer.
nursing lawyer, whatever. But really, been very fortunate in my life, and wonderful experiences, good times, nice people, and just,
So if
you know.
someone out there was contemplating going into military service, you would say?
Oh my goodness, I would recommend it, especially for women. Especially for women. You have equal pay for equal work,
Yeah.
and you have great jobs. You have interesting things. You can, and especially now, you can work your way up. We have women generals, and you can do a lot of things. And it's a wonderful life. I was thinking about, I was contemplating what I liked best about the service.
Right.
And
Yeah, the one thing that really sticks
right,
out. We always
because I've had all of these different experiences, and I thought, well, gee, that was great, but you know what? This was just as good, or that was great, or. But as I thought about it, each thing I was thinking about that was such a great experience revolved around the people I was with, and it became very clear to me that the best part about being in the service was the people that you serve with, that these people are dedicated to something larger than themselves, and they have a camaraderie. They know who they are. They know what their goal is. They know what they're searching for, and they are very, very helpful and supportive of one another as a rule, and they make the difference. And I could never tell anybody not to go if they wanted to go. I think it's the best thing you could do.
So your next position is going to be as a recruiter.
Well, if they would take civilians, I could, but they won't take civilians.
Arlene,
So-
it's been great. You've been fantastic. It's been a great journey. Thank you so much for sharing
Well,
this with us.
My pleasure. I love to share those experiences. It was a wonderful.
Please take home with you the thought that you're a heroine for what you did. I mean, going up in an airplane at 20,000 feet,
Yeah.
and taking care of people in some of the places you've been, in Libya and whatever. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff.
We'll see you next time on the Woodbridge Veterans Project.